I'm Charles Thorpe. Now I'm very excited to chat with our next guest, amazing Tyler Henry is, guys. Make another round of applause for Tyler Henry is here. We're a great audience here in New York City, but if you're at home and you want to join the conversation, just hit the button that says Ask a Question or tweet at BuildSeriesNYC. Now, since starting at the age of 16, Tyler's become one of the world's most in-demand mediums. Jim Parsons, Iggy Azalea, and Megan Fox are just a few of the people who have met with him for guidance. His show, Hollywood Medium, is now going to its 3rd season. Let's check out a clip, and then we'll bring him on stage. Thanks.
My name is Tyler Henry. As a medium, my life goal is to provide validation that there's more to life than what we see. You're showing me a big bat and hitting boys with bats.
Holy
Didn't intend to end his life.
It just kills me.
And somehow, I've become Hollywood's go-to medium.
It's Megan Fox. Can you believe it?
I'm like trying to contain myself.
I am a huge fan of yours as well.
Thank you.
I really am.
You're like better than Oprah to me.
Lord.
The question is, can we find the truth?
Get out of here, no way.
I can't believe that I got to talk to my father.
I'm like, ah! I've never, ever voiced that to anyone.
Wow. Oh, man.
That was like top 3 coolest experiences of my life. Maybe this is top 2. Yeah, skydiving and meeting with Tyler.
Guys, Tyler Henry is here. Give him another round of applause. Now he's on stage.
Thank you guys for having me. I'm happy to be here.
I can't wait to talk about this next season, but let's start off with just talking a little bit about what a medium means to you, what being a medium means to you.
Sure. Well, to me, a medium is someone who acts as a conduit between this realm and the next. And as a clairvoyant medium, I receive most of my messages through visuals. They're really quick impressions that I get, and they usually are images or symbolic images.
And there are things that are coming up in their lives or messages that the Beyond are trying to communicate to the people here, right?
That's right. And going into a reading, I never know what's going to come through, nor who's going to come through. I just communicate what I see, hear, and feel, and oftentimes it ends up making sense to the clients.
It's amazing. I know these people that you're meeting, what are you trying to do for them? What are you trying to bring to them here on Earth?
Well, for every client that I meet, regardless of celebrity or not, everyone's pretty much looking for the same things. And my goal is just to try to provide clarity and closure and insight and to leave people better than I found them. And I never know what they need, but by the end of it, usually they get something out of it.
Let's talk about season 3 a little bit. Some of these people, you don't know who they are going into it, right? They just open the door and you meet them for the first time. And for a lot of the times, you don't know who they are.
Right, yeah, that can be a little awkward. I never know where I'm going or who I'm reading, so it's always interesting.
Who are the people that you were most shocked to see on the other side of the door that you were familiar with their work?
Right, well, LaToya Jackson this season, Megan Fox was obviously a huge one. Todd Chrisley and Savannah Chrisley actually got a reading as well, so there were a couple familiar faces.
And were they shocked? Were they shocked themselves? I mean, they obviously, sometimes they're skeptics, sometimes they're not, sometimes they're believers. I mean, how do you deal with that scenario?
Absolutely. On the show, we've dealt with so many people who were believers from the get-go, people who were straight up skeptical from the get-go, ranging from Dr. Drew to, notorious people who were known in the medical field. So for me, I think it's important just for people to be open-minded when they go into the process, but I'm fine with skepticism, and I find that oftentimes stuff comes through regardless. So.
I mean, obviously you can't pick a favorite, but are there a few top episodes for you that you saw some breakthroughs happen?
I would say, my reading with RuPaul for me personally was probably one of the most profound. For me, I was a massive fan of him, and so getting to meet him was really special on a personal level because growing up and being different, I really resonated with him. I wasn't a drag queen, but I'm a medium. and,
so you had your own sort of separation from society in a way, yeah.
Absolutely. I feel like I could really relate to being different. I think we all can. I mean, we're not all mediums, but we all have things about us that are unique. And I think he really taught me at a young age from the show alone to just kind of be myself and be yourself unapologetically and love yourself before you love anyone else.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. I mean, you have the skill, but you have to deal with people as well, and you have to deal with them going through a sort of emotional breakthrough in some cases. Kristen Cavallari, we saw in that clip. I mean, how's it to be on the other side of that? How do you sort of break the boundary of telling them the information and also sort of comforting in that scenario?
Well, for me, I really have to keep my clients' feelings in mind. And in the process, it's really very much an informational process. For me, I'm having to make sure that whatever message I'm receiving properly and interpreting accurately. I put such an emphasis on validation and getting information that's specific and personal. And that, for me, is really a lot of work. So I have to really focus on that. But oftentimes, clients get very emotional or burst into tears. And I just allow them to kind of have their moment. And then I keep delivering the messages. Because once they get going, it's hard to stop.
Yeah, I mean, with the Kristen episode in particular, can you tell us about that sort of situation?
Absolutely. Well, the Kristen episode, Kristen Cavallari is in episode 1, and that reading was really intense because this was done actually in Nashville. And anytime I have to travel it can get intense as a medium, especially in New York City. But this reading was done in Nashville, and she opened the door, and I didn't know that her parents were actually watching the reading in the other room. And as I sat with her, her brother came through, who passed away, and he had gone missing, and he came through and clarified a number of details about his passing. We were in a mansion in Nashville, and I was sitting across from her, and he showed me a whole wall of license plates, and he kept putting emphasis on one falling off, and I didn't know why. And as I was picking up on this, I was telling it to her, and she looked at me, and she was like, and I still had to stick to it. Ends up, her dad was watching the reading in the back, and shortly before that reading, he had gotten a license plate with his son's birthday and death date, and that was a private, family, intimate detail, so that was validation.
Absolutely. I mean, there's other, actors you have on there, huge stars like Jim Parsons. Obviously, the world knows him, one of the most popular TV shows out there right now.
Right.
I mean, obviously, when you're going to a scenario like this, you're dealing with people who have a huge public image, and there's a lot of things that can be known about them. I mean, are they sort of judgmental or sort of critical when it comes to some of the facts that you're picking up on, and whether?
I think, yeah, oftentimes celebrities know, what they say. They know what they speak about in interviews because, well, they're the ones who do them. So these people know what's public information and what's not. And for me, my job is really to get specific validations, last moments, people's intimate memories, details that are so specific and accurate that there's no way you could Google it or research it. And being a medium in the public eye, and especially dealing with public figures, I have to really kind of up the ante and make sure that I'm getting those details, which are really, I think, what gives it credibility and what allows for these transformations to happen.
I mean, another one of those moments I saw was Gus Kenworthy, right, the Olympic skier, freestyle skier, and he, he's sort of skeptical a little bit. He's sort of, feeling you out, and then immediately, almost in the first minute, he sort of, you say a few things that have him break down. I mean, do you see that often? What was it like meeting him for the first time and doing that session?
Oh, well, Gus was really special. I didn't recognize him when he opened the door. The Olympics hadn't happened yet, so that might be why. But he was so lovely, and when he went into it, I could definitely tell there was maybe a little apprehension. He was pretty skeptical. But as we sat together, his friend came through who had fallen off of a vehicle and passed away. And Gus had been there at the time of this accident when he was very young. And he kept showing me this bird, but he kept acknowledging a name. And I didn't know what this was. It was like I'm saying a bird nickname. And Gus called his friend Hoot, and Hoot called Gus Goose. So they both had bird nicknames for each other.
I mean, how do you find that after you do sessions with has anybody stayed in touch? If anybody come back for second readings, can you tell a little bit about that?
Absolutely. I find that I stay in touch with most of the clients. In fact, this season we actually have a follow-up with Todd and Julie, where I actually read Savannah Chrisley, their daughter. So that's actually a really interesting thing. And in our original reading with Todd and Julie, I connected with Todd's father. His father comes through for Todd's daughter. So Todd, the granddaughter in this situation. A lot of family going on. But it's a completely different dynamic, which I thought was interesting than from Todd's reading. So it just kind of shows the unique aspects of our relationships and how it reflects on the other side.
I mean, this is kind of a crazy life you found yourself in. And can you tell a little bit about the path to this career? Obviously, it started around when you were younger, right?
Right, absolutely. For me, this entire journey started when I was only 10 years old. And growing up, I grew up in a very conservative Christian household. We didn't talk about spirits. We didn't talk about ghosts. If I hadn't had this experience, I probably wouldn't have even believed in it. But at 10 years old, I went to bed one night in April of 2006, and I woke up with a complete knowingness that my grandmother was going to die. And I didn't doubt it. I didn't question it. It felt like it had already happened, and when I woke up, I was just remembering it. So I rolled out of bed, and I ran into the room to tell my mom, and as I was telling her, I remember being so upset and frustrated because I didn't know what was going on, and then her phone rang. And when she picked it up, it was the news from my dad that my grandmother had just died. In that moment, everything changed, but at 10 years old, you don't call that a premonition, but it definitely was the catalyst.
And how did your parents sort of deal with this, this budding young kid who has this gift?
Right. Well, funny enough, I didn't tell my dad about this for 6 years. So in that initial
you were
moment...
just telling mom, basically.
Just telling mom, and so this is kind of a secret my mom and I had. In that initial premonition, my mom was able to witness that, but she really didn't embrace it. We didn't discuss it. I think she was so immersed in her grief that she just kind of assumed that my grandmother and I were so close that maybe that's why I knew. But as time went on, I would go to school and get feelings about kids at school and teachers, and then I later graduated high school early to try to become a hospice nurse and ended up having to tell my dad.
I heard that you actually did sessions with your teachers in some cases, right?
I did, that's correct, yeah, absolutely. There was a lot of interesting situations. High school primarily was especially interesting in that regard. I had a math teacher, and I was always horrible at math, like awful, god-awful. And I remember I had a D in the class, and I told the teacher, after class one day that I, got feelings, and I asked if I could share something with her, and I got two names, and it was Dwayne and Lorraine. Wow, good memory, Tyler. Dwayne and Lorraine. And as I was sitting in class, I remember getting these feelings, these names. And so I came up to her after, and I said, does Dwayne and Lorraine mean anything to you? She said, Dwayne's my ex-husband. Lorraine's his mother, who just died. And in that moment, she started helping me, and in exchange for tutoring, she would come to me for advice. And that's how I got to be.
That worked out pretty well. What did the kids think when you were saying things like this?
I didn't deal with as much skepticism as I thought. If anything, I dealt with more fear. People didn't really doubt my ability at high school as much as they were more frightened by it. In fact, early on, I remember going into a bathroom, washing my hands, and during break, a group of kids came in, and one was a bully that had bullied me quite heavily as a child growing up. And he came in with two other boys and locked the door. And I knew that I was going to get beat up. And I turned around, and I looked at him, and something just came out of my mouth. I don't remember ever saying anything to indicate this. It just came out. And I said, your aunt knows that you were crying with your dad last night because of her death. And I saw a car accident. And the look on his face, he looked at me, he turned around, he unlocked the door, and he and both of his friends ran out of the bathroom. And in that moment, they never, bothered me again, but it did kind of create an environment of fear, which I didn't like in high school.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I mean, so you're dealing with these different sort of feelings towards your gift. Can you tell me when you started doing this professionally and counseling people, maybe strangers that you didn't know?
Right. Well, for me, I ended up graduating high school early. At the age of 16, I really knew that I wanted to use this ability in some capacity, but I didn't know if I wanted to do it in a public sense. Obviously, it worked out. But, I really wanted to use it in a way that was going to be helpful, and I felt like being a hospice nurse was an ideal way to do this. So I graduated high school early and went to community college and ended up trying to go through that process and enrolled in classes. And as I was doing it, I was doing readings, and word of mouth spread, and before I knew it, I basically had to make a choice between having time to do classwork or doing readings, and ultimately readings took demand. And for me, I never advertised my readings. I felt like if you're legitimate, word of mouth will spread. And within a year, I was overwhelmed with requests and readings.
And celebrity requests, right, as well, before the show occurred.
That happened a little bit, before. I got the show when I was 19, and by the time I was 17, I was doing celebrity readings. So within a year, it took off, and my first celebrity client was Sarah Paulson from American Horror Story.
She's
you guys
fantastic,
know her.
yeah.
Great, and that was over the phone. And I initially, when she contacted me, didn't know it was that Sarah Paulson. I got an email, it just said Sarah Paulson. It's just like, hi, I'm
It's
interested
like
in getting
kind of
readings.
regular name.
Right, I was like, oh, probably, someone next door neighbor. Nope, it was the Sarah Paulson.
And how, were you nervous at all when you were on the phone call with her?
My hand was shaking the entire time. It was sweaty, and when I hung up, I remember I almost dropped the phone because it was I was so freaked out. But it was really a great experience because I was a huge fan of her, and I think it really set me on the course to being in the entertainment industry and reading those people.
Yeah, and then meeting people in person and doing those readings. What was the first one of those, or the first couple of those?
Oh my gosh! Well, primarily in the beginning, it was just journalists, television journalists that I had read. I can't actually remember who my first celebrity client was off camera. But, I found as time went on, I saw the importance with the show, like in reading celebrities. A lot of people think, why do you just read celebrities? I don't. The show just happens to focus on a very small part of my overall clientele. And most of my clients are members of the general public. But I think the platform this has given me in tapping into the viewers who watch these celebrities, who know and love these celebrities, it kind of allows them, the viewer, to get into these people's lives and see a side of them they might not normally see, and find a relatability and maybe even a healing that they might not have gotten otherwise. So it's been amazing.
Absolutely, I love that. I mean, I think it's a great portrayal of it on television. I think, there's not many of those true portrayals. I mean, who are you looking up to? Who are you seeing? Obviously, there's a couple names out there that come to mind. And then,
Right.
Fictional television and fictional movies that are out there sort of portraying this sort of thing.
Absolutely. I think there's a lot of misconceptions about mediums due to Hollywood, ironically. It's not like The Sixth Sense for me. I don't see dead people walking around, nor do I think that's really how it works.
You don't see Bruce Willis around.
Exactly. Well, that would be pretty cool. For me, it's really just a process of interpreting subtle impressions. So that's pretty much how it works.
I mean, was that something you set out to do with the show, from the get-go? I mean, tell us a little bit about how the show came to be.
Well, the show just kind of naturally fell in my lap, as odd as it sounds. I went to a Christmas party one evening, with a manager, and met a man who would later become the executive producer of the show. He was a bit of a skeptic, but he said, I'm interested in mediums. I'd like to get a reading. Could you do it for me? I met him at his house the next day. And his friend came through, and it was an incredibly emotional experience. He became a believer, and we basically shot a reel of just a couple readings with members of the general public, and then he gave us the call.
And tell me about the first episode that you guys shot together for that show.
Yeah, that was with Tom Arnold, Jamie Presley, And who's the third one? Snooki.
It's not too bad. It's not too
Snooki.
bad for a first episode.
Exactly. Yeah, it was a pretty good lineup, and Snooki was obviously full of entertainment. But it was great. I loved in the first episode that we dealt with a hardcore skeptic. Tom Arnold went into this not believing, like, just straight up. And it was great because it, from the get-go, showed the world that it was able to get information that was specific and personal, and information that wasn't public. And in his reading, what really turned him was his mom came through, and she spoke on her mental illness and what she dealt with, and some very specific things that she did in his childhood. And she acknowledged that she was free of that. And in that moment, I really saw the importance of being able to tell people we're not limited to our physical disabilities or our mental disabilities in life when we transition, and that, you know, they really see the bigger picture.
I mean, how is it for you going to a first episode and having Tom Arnold, a skeptic guy who's very vocal, be one of your first episodes to film?
Of course, it's a huge risk. In the event that it had gone any other way than it did, I probably wouldn't be here right now, you know? So I'm really thankful that it went that way. And since then, I've read a number of skeptics, from Dr. Drew to a number of people, so it's been amazing.
And how do you guys, decide on the format of it? Obviously, you have the car ride with your mother, which is fantastic. Explain, why you guys do the car ride.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the show, my mom will typically drive me to these readings. Sometimes it's my assistant. But we never know where we're going or who we're reading. And we follow a lead vehicle. So the driver of the vehicle never actually has an address or anywhere. And half the time we'll film either at a hotel or at a rented location. So basically we go, follow a lead car, and when we drop off, I walk in and knock on the door, and whoever opens it, I have to just go in and do the reading. Now, there's never really any stopping beside just a quick camera readjustment. I never have my phone on me. It's always just like a real quick process. So.
And you do that so you can pick up on sort of things as you're going into the ride, right?
Yeah, and I think for me it's really important. Obviously, there's skeptics, and people being public figures, it's essential that I not know who I'm reading. So when I go into these, I really just try to pick up on the specifics.
And then sometimes you'll sketch and you'll draw, and you explain why you do that?
So doodling is actually a big part of my process, and it's something that happened in my teen years, I discovered. I was talking to a girlfriend, not an actual girlfriend, but a friend that was a female, on the phone. And we were doing our homework, and I was doodling. And I remember as I was talking to her, every time I put the pen to paper, I would kind of get inundated with impressions about her and not the homework. And for some reason, it just worked. And so as I implemented it into readings, I found that it was kind of a repetitive motion that kind of helped me get in the zone, get in kind of like a trance-like state, and it just helped me connect and turn on and off.
What were a couple of the landmark episodes in your first and second season that you loved? Obviously, there's a couple highlights there.
Right. Oh, my gosh. There have been so many. I'd say my reading with Jennifer Esposito is still to this day one of the most special ones for me, because this was done in New York, and it was done at a bakery. And Jennifer handed me a man's bow tie. And it had white polka dots, and it was blue. And as I was holding on to it, I thought, okay, maybe she wants to connect to a grandpa or an uncle or whatever, but I can't judge. As I was holding on to it, I got a reference to the name Frank, but it kept coming through like a child with a sense of excitement, and I didn't understand why. I didn't get much else, but she ended up telling me that the bow tie I was holding on to was her golden retriever, Frankie. The dog used to wear the actual bow tie, and it was his, and he was who she was hoping to get.
How
in
would
touch
you have
with.
guessed that? There's no way to guess that.
Exactly. So stuff like that really validates that love is a force, and that it even transcends humanity. I mean, we really are all inherently connected.
I mean, the Alan Thicke episode is another powerful one. Can you talk about that one a little bit?
Absolutely. The Alan Thicke episode was probably one of the hardest experiences in filming the show, because during that initial session, he was a total skeptic. I sat with him and brought through a loved one who passed away of a tragic heart condition. This loved one came through and said, exactly, don't be stubborn like I was, don't be stubborn like I was, get your heart checked. Alan looked at me and said, thanks, Dr. Tyler, and he laughed it off. And 3 months later, he passed away of an undiagnosed heart condition. So this was a message that was preventative, and unfortunately, it ended that way.
I mean, do you find it difficult when you have to give that sort of news? Obviously, people are looking to probably hear just the great things, oh, you're loved, that sort of thing. And then when you have to deliver, bad news, I mean, how do you deal with that?
For me, I find it actually to be empowering, because for me, I don't really deliver bad news as much as I give information that can help a person move forward. And whether it's bringing awareness to our medical health, taking the initiative to go to a doctor, get checked, stop a problem before it becomes one, to me, that's empowering. So, I do have to sometimes assert difficult themes and ideas on the show, because that's the nature of people's families. From paternity issues to alcoholism, but it's all mentioned and brought forward with the means of healing and with the goal of trying to validate and take accountability often.
What do you find was the biggest response you got, maybe that you weren't anticipating? Again, you're opening the door, you don't know who these people are sometimes, and then you sort of, the public is sort of making, Biggie Smalls, obviously making contact with him has got to be a fascinating situation.
That was really fascinating. With little Kim, I mean, she was something. She's, to this day, is one of my favorite clients, and actually we had a really interesting bond. I mean, you connect with all clients, but it's kind of liken it to a therapist, and there's some I get along with personally more than others, and she was someone I really had a great connection with, and getting to connect her with Biggie was really special. But he came through in such a way that it wasn't as a celebrity, it was as her former love, trying to come through and just communicate a message and validate that.
And how do you sort of deal with a scenario where people are sort of looking into what you're saying as fact, or looking for actual news, in a celebrity sense?
Sure. Well, in what regard?
In the regard of, how someone felt about somebody, obviously there's a lot of post-humorous news that comes out about Biggie.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's always a bit of an interesting thing because people always are curious to know how do they feel about so-and-so or how do they feel about someone else. But in the readings for me, I find that typically there'll be a message for the client I'm reading, and there'll also be messages for other people. And it's often, I think, that client's, opportunity to be able to share these messages with others or not. In a little Kim session, he had some messages for some others that I hope she passed on.
That's amazing. Do you have a list of people that you'd love to sit down with and people that you'd love to make contact with, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I just want to help people. I think the readings that I want to do the most are going to be the ones that resonate with people the most, the ones that other people, viewers, can get a sense of healing from. But Tonya Harding would be an interesting one. Hi, Tonya. That was a good movie. She has a fascinating story. And
I think you have to do a whole special on that if you get that.
You have to fly me to Oregon.
How do you sort of select, this other producers select who you're going to be sitting down with, but do you have sort of a dream list that you give to the producers?
I've named some people before. I'm like, I'd love to read them, but the casting process is completely beside me, and they do it all through E and through production. So sometimes clients will actually reach out to production. Sometimes I assume the network will reach out to people, and then they coordinate it that way. So Tonya, if you're watching, call someone on my team.
Let's get out there. Let's get it out there. I love it. Okay, well, we have some questions in the audience.
Awesome.
Hi, Tyler.
Hi.
So I'm curious. I've actually met with a medium before, and it was probably the most fascinating thing I've ever been through. And I was just curious, when you get messages, how do you know it's accurate?
Well, I think validation is such an important part of the process. And for me, I really am trying to kind of give a different idea of what a medium is. Because I think when a lot of us think of a psychic or a medium, we think of a middle-aged woman with long fingernails, the whole thing. And for me, my goal is to really provide details and specifics. Anybody can tell you your loved one loves you. Anyone can tell you your loved one's proud of you. That's not psychic. What psychic is providing the validations and the specifics that back that up. And those are going to be taking the form of childhood memories. Those are going to take the form of intimate details, things that convey the essence of your loved one that you without a doubt know are accurate. And a note on that, you guys know your loved ones more than any medium. So if you go to a medium and they're talking and it doesn't sound like something your loved one would say, it's probably not them. You really have to trust that that person is going to convey the essence of that person, and a medium who's legitimate will.
Fantastic. Okay, next question.
Hey, Tyler. My name's Sebastian. Big fan of yours.
Thank you.
Recently, my really good friend from growing up passed away 2 weeks ago.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I think I speak for myself and a lot of friends back home that are actually watching live. How do you deal with unexpected death, kind of have closure, especially with grief and maybe some sort of guilt along the way that maybe you were able to help out more, but you weren't?
Yeah, I'm so sorry that happened, and I deal with that a lot with people who do go through devastating losses. I lost my own best friend very early on. He passed away of brain cancer when he was 17, and I never got the chance to say goodbye in person. And for me, I think it's just important that we try to honor the legacy of our loved ones. I always say, take the love that your loved one gives you and spread it with the world. So your friend, the impact he made on your life, introduce his impact to other people by helping people and doing things in his honor and living your life to the fullest, because I believe they do live vicariously through our actions. And I think when it comes to guilt, that's a whole thing that they often assert on the other side. They don't ever bring that forward as acknowledging of us wanting us to be guilty, wanting us to feel any shame. They are free of that, and they really process their ego and acknowledge that they appreciate our loved ones and those who loved them. So he's always with you. Of course.
Absolutely. Okay, one last question.
Yeah, I love it. Hi.
Did it ever get hard, like going to the supermarket or out in public? Like, do you want to stop people all the time to like read them?
So for me, in the beginning, that was a challenge. And I actually talk about a story in my book where I went to a supermarket in my teen years, and I was walking down the aisle, and I saw a woman, and her father came through just immediately. And for some reason, I felt this gasping for air, felt my throat kind of closing, and I kept hearing, "I love you, I love you, I love you." So I stopped this woman in the supermarket and I said, ma'am, I don't know what you're gonna think about this, but I'm a medium, and she just didn't look on her face. And I said, is your dad passed? And she said, yes. And I said, did he have difficulty speaking before? And she said, yes, he had throat cancer. I said, was he gasping for air to try to tell you something? And she started bursting into tears, crying. And I said, he just wanted you to know he loves you, and that's what he was trying to say. And in that moment, this woman collapsed in the supermarket, crying, because the one thing she needed to know from her dad is what he was trying to say with his last breaths. So that was a game changer for me because I realized the impact this could have, and I also realized how important it is to have a time and a place. To me, I liken this to like therapy. It's something that's very intimate and very personal, and it's not something that I would do for someone at a supermarket in this day and age or stop people on the street, because people might not be in the right headspace for it. You know, we all go through our grief process. Some people aren't believers. Some people aren't open to that, and I only want to really help people who seek me out for the help.
Well, it was such a pleasure to have you here. Hollywood Medium is on E! Guys. Check it out. 3rd season, Tyler Henry. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it, everybody.